Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Let's start with events from last night in the UK Parliament, which remains unputdownable. The programme vote, which was the key vote where Boris Johnson was trying to force a conclusion before the 31st of October, was lost 308 to 322. And therefore it's not clear where things go from here, but sterling, this is interesting, V. Patel, foreign exchange, sterling last at 128.64, and he predicts short flex tension and MPs back, amended deal 133, 134. Flex tension and MPs back deal subject to public vote 132. Flex tension and general election 127 to 128. Extension Brexit limbo 125. No extension, no deal 115. So we're currently at 128.62. I think we actually come back to 125 under the circumstances as I understand them through last night. Year-to-date ranked global returns. This is from the market here. Interestingly, Russia at the forefront this time around. Benjamin Disraeli, the world is governed by very different personages than from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. And that, of course, took me to the Wizard of Oz. And in that article I was writing about the bond market, and we've had an interesting development. Global negative yielding debt has dropped below $13 trillion. Markets seem to think that the central banks are losing their will on negative rates. That's the bond freak. And I wrote that article, The Wizard of Oz. In each of these occasions, the wizard appears in a different form. Once as a giant head, a beautiful fairy, a ball of fire, and as a horrible monster. When at last he grants an audience to all of them at once, he seems to be a disembodied voice. Eventually it is revealed that Oz is actually none of these things, but rather an ordinary con man from Omaha, Nebraska, who has been using elaborate magic tricks and props to make himself seem great and powerful. The point I was making is that this whole negative rate business is really a Wizard of Oz scenario, and it can't last, and I think we're seeing that come off now. This is the difference in interest rates between the Federal Reserve and the US and the ECB. That's from J.S. Blockland. That continues to narrow. US expected to cut rates this month, and I think the ECB now will stop with all this hocus-pocus monetary policy, notwithstanding the fact that Christine Lagarde is dovish, typically. Home thoughts, whatever you're meant to do, do it now. The conditions are always impossible. Doris Lessing. What is a hero without love for mankind? Good point. I was filled with such a dangerous, delicious intoxication that I could have walked straight off the steps into the air, climbing on the strength of my own drunkenness into the stars. And the intoxication was the recklessness of infinite possibility. And finally, I like this photograph by Fraser King, London Lights. Political reflections, this rather threw me. This is the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed issuing a warning over the Renaissance Dam. This is via Hamza Africa. If there is a need to go to war, we could get millions readied. Of course, on the 14th of October, I wrote about him winning the Nobel Prize, Eliud Kipchoge running the sub-2-hour marathon, the World Bank's Africa Pulse Report, Ecclesiastes, and Ozymandias. Dan Rather tweeted, Quid, pro, and quo walk into a bar. The Washington Post has obtained a copy of Ambassador Bill Taylor's opening statement, in which he says he was told the release of Ukraine aid was contingent on the public declaration to investigate the Bidens around the 2016 election. And clearly this was the case. Trump compares an impeachment inquiry to a lynching, which is quite an extraordinary comparison when you consider the background to Trump and Trump's dad. While fuming Tuesday morning about the House Democrats' ongoing impeachment inquiry, President Trump declared the probe a lynching, prompting outcry at the inflammatory language. "You think this impeachment is a lynching? What the hell is wrong with you?" said Representative Bobby Rush. "Do you know how many people who look like me have been lynched since the inception of this country by people who look like you? Delete this tweet." And then Nick Kristof, a staggering degree of self-pity. "Trump may be short of empathy in general, but he brims with sympathy for himself." President Assad of Syria is seen visiting Idlib province's front line in a series of tweets emitted by his own handle, and it made me think he outlasted them all. Bibi Netanyahu, Barack Obama, David Cameron, Nicolas Sarkozy, and he's probably got Erdogan in those sights in this photograph where he's seen looking through binoculars. The media also quoted Assad as calling Erdogan a thief who robbed factories, wheat and fuel, and is today stealing territory, apparently referring to Turkey's invasion this month into northeastern Syria to push out Syrian Kurdish fighters, and he's not wrong. Putin, of course, met with Erdogan yesterday. "You have come and the weather has become so beautiful," he said as he received him. This is from Oscock_A. My article over the weekend was "The New Economy of Anger," talking about, quoting Virilio, "the revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed." I spoke about the WhatsApp revolution in Lebanon, Hong Kong being in rebellion, trying to shake off the crusher of bones and his algorithmic control. And I said prolonged standoffs eviscerate economies, reducing opportunities and accelerate the negative feedback loop. Antonio Gramsci, "The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Now is the time of monsters." I said leadership in the 21st century has become nationalistic and jingoistic. Horizons have been narrowed. I quoted McLuhan, "There are no passengers on the spaceship Earth. We are all crew. Kapuściński revolution must be distinguished from revolt, coup d'etat, palace takeover. A coup or a palace takeover may be planned, but a revolution never. Its outbreak, the hour of that outbreak, takes everyone, even those who've been striving for it, unawares. They stand amazed at the spontaneity that appears suddenly and destroys everything in its path. It demolishes so ruthlessly that in the end it may annihilate the ideals that called it into being." I said this is a revolution and it is a global phenomenon. Kapuściński also said if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. It is not over, I said. More and more people are gathering in the streets. And I finally concluded by saying the current modus operandi is running on empty. Tracking global riot risks This is from Bloomberg. From Hong Kong to Chile in Lebanon, violent clashes between protesters and police have turned capital cities into danger zones, sparking growth fears and market slumps. And it's an interesting infographic. If it's true that a riot, as the Reverend Martin Luther King once said, is the language of the unheard, then a lot of the people around the world are becoming fluent in that particular dialect. The LA Times, Hong Kong, Barcelona, Middle East, Haiti, Ecuador, Chile, and most of the global protests began with seemingly minor friction points: a subway hike in Chile, a fuel subsidy cut in Ecuador, a new law in Indonesia that ignited deeper anger and frustration over poverty and corruption. Is it a tipping point, they ask? Probably not. The question is, will governments heed the messages of abject frustration delivered by banners, rocks and firebombs? Well, they better. And then this wonderful tweet: I can now report that this drop was savage. This is from Timora Zahari in Lebanon. Liz Sly says, what can be counted on to live up to the cliches is Lebanon by holding a revolution and a dance party at the same time. Chile, when our politicians get $11,000 a month, but our minimum wage is $469 approximately, which is what most of the country gets a month, that inequality is violent. When our politicians pass laws to raise their wages in less than a week, but laws to have a better health plan and release money for medical supplies take months and months, that's violence. Hong Kong police already have AI tech that can recognize faces. Hong Kong law enforcement authorities have access to artificial intelligence software that can match faces from any video footage to police databases, but it's unclear if it's being used to quell months-long pro-democracy protests, according to people familiar with the matter. People have been able to use the technology from Sydney-based Omniscient for at least 3 years. The software can scan footage, including from closed-circuit television, to automatically match faces and license plates to a police database and pick out suspects in a crowd. Demonstrators have worn masks, destroyed CCTV cameras, torn down so-called smart lampposts and used umbrellas to hide acts of vandalism. Why are people still wearing face masks? Because of the police surveillance. Omniscient declined to comment on whether Hong Kong's police use its facial recognition technology. The world's 5 most watched cities are all in China, with the top city of Chongqing having about 168 cameras per 1,000 people, according to estimates by Comparitech. The whole thing is, do you trust the government with your data, said Mock, who had been in the information technology industry for more than 20 years. That's the problem, if there's a whole breakdown of trust. At least one Hong Kong company, Tic Tac Technology, pulled out of the smart lamppost program after protesters tore one down and found a Bluetooth beacon the company used to signal its location to devices including smartphones. Demonstrators then doxed some of the group's founders. In this, a demonstrator seen breaking a surveillance camera inside the New Town Plaza, October 13. In this photograph, demonstrators are pulling down a smart lamppost on August 24. 7th of October, I wrote, the folks in Hong Kong whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them are in open rebellion. Joshua Wong says Hong Kong ist das neue Berlin. I said on the 19th of August that I did not think it was possible to Xinjiang Hong Kong. Xi, in another article, I said, is building an algorithmic society through which you can exercise algorithmic control. 5th of March 2018, I wrote about how China had unveiled a digital panopticon in Xinjiang, which was the laboratory for what we're seeing here. Dissent is measured and snuffed out very quickly. combination of data from video surveillance, face and license plate recognition, mobile device locations, official records to identify targets for detention. Xinjiang is surely a precursor for how the CCP will manage dissent. Actions in Xinjiang are part of the regional authorities' ongoing strike hard campaign and President Xi's stability maintenance and enduring peace drive in the region. Another report on Bloomberg, China is struggling to offload foreign acquisitions from yachts to pizza. China Inc. is struggling to offload overseas businesses and the accompanying debt in an increasingly volatile market. Volume of Chinese outbound deals was $59 billion so far this year, 13% drop from a year earlier. It's a far cry from the peak of 2016 when China National Chemical Corp agreed to buy the Swiss agrochemical maker Syngenta for $43 billion. Apparently one of the acquisitions was Ferretti, which is a yacht company in Venice. Looks pretty fantastic. And I take you back to the 14th of October when I was writing about this, and I was referencing FOCAC in 2018 when Xi Jinping specifically spoke of the end of vanity. I jumped to Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who have come after. But the point remains the same, they're short of money and they're looking to trim their portfolio. The real case for saving species, we don't need them, but they need us, says Yale E360's Carl Safina. I recently visited a museum exhibit on big cats. A sign featuring a beautiful jaguar asked, "Why should we care about wild cats?" Its answer, because in protecting big cats, we're protecting ourselves. Is that really true? That implies big cats are in trouble because we don't care to protect ourselves. And if it turns out that we don't really need jaguars in order to protect ourselves, have they lost their case for existence? If they go extinct, we'll go extinct is a common refrain. The only problem is false, he says. We drove the most abundant bird in the Americas, the passenger pigeon, to extinction. The most abundant large mammal, the American bison, to functional extinction. We gained agriculture, safety for cows, from sea to shining sea. Who misses the Eskimo curlew? Indeed, who knows they existed? Their vast migrating flocks like smoke on the now gone prairies. Governments, institutions, regular people have cheered the material expansion that has cost many species and tribal peoples everything. We are losing many species along the way to humanity's only three apparent real goals: bigger, faster, more. Propelling the human juggernaut has entailed wiping many species out of the way, people living at high densities in places devoid of wild species and natural beauty. Human beings have thrived by destroying nature. Telling people that we need jaguars to protect ourselves, that's a hard sell. We don't need them. Annihilation comes easy to Homo sapiens. What's of little interest for us is coexistence. Think of your favourite species: gorillas, sperm whales, hyacinth macaws, Kana blue butterflies. Billions of people never gave them a thought. Far down the line, when the land is exhausted and there's no water on an overheated planet, there may be a great reckoning, he said. What a grim world it will be by the time we're down to what humans need. This is a photograph of a jaguar from this article, but I disagree with him. I cannot help feeling we're frogs in boiling water. We have created massive interference in the cosmic tuning phenomenon, and the horizon about which he speaks is coming at us at a great speed. And I do think the end is nigh, and the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse, are not to be underestimated, which he seems to be underestimating. I still don't know what to make of this footage from M. Salimu. Please click on it, it's pretty extraordinary. Looks like some voodoo thing. International markets, let's go to the currency markets. Euro dollar 111.21. Dollar index 97.526, Japanese yen 108.38, Swiss franc 0.9893, the pound 128.75, Australian dollar 0.6840, India rupee 70.89, South Korean won 11.71, the Rial 407.97, Egyptian pound 16.1981, and the Rand 14.626. Dollar index, this is a 3-month chart, 97.523, bit of a recovery because of the sterling generated sell-off. Euro dollar 111.21, and I'm beginning to think that the dollar's rally has run out of steam, but let's keep an eye on things for a little while. Commodity markets, WTI crude oil, last time I checked, was around the $54.20 area. Key resistance is at 55. We've been near up there a couple of times, but not succeeded. Goldman Sachs has turned short-term bullish on oil fundamentals, saying oil fundamentals have recently improved with a large Q3 deficit and declining EM inventories, both setting the stage for an OECD stock draws into year-end. I've previously written about the pork apocalypse, which speaks to a very fragile food situation. I came across this tweet from Audio Comedian. I read it and reread it and read it again, just to make sure that the numbers in the English translation match the official Chinese statement. Have a look. It looks as if the pork herd has been decimated in China. Putin and el-Sisi are co-hosting the Russia-Africa summit in Sochi. His timing is pretty good, with China reining in and others being more circumspect. Spokesman for the Egyptian presidency says Russia has white hands in Africa, and hence, are partnering up with them. Russia also announced plans to send 2 nuclear-capable Tu-160 bombers to South Africa, in what observers say would be the first such deployment on the African continent. The Tupolev Tu-160 strategic bomber, nicknamed the White Swan in Russian, is a supersonic Soviet-era aircraft capable of carrying up to 12 short-range nuclear missiles and flying 12,000 kilometers non-stop without refueling. So this is the program, Economic Forum Russia-Africa program. If you're interested, the link is there on Rich Wrap-Ups. Putin said Russia was ready to offer help without political or other conditions, and to embrace the principle of African solutions for African problems. He knows how to talk the talk. We see how an array of Western countries are resorting to pressure, intimidation and blackmail of sovereign African governments, Putin told the TASS news agency. They are using such methods to try to return lost influence and dominance in their former colonies in a new guise, and rushing to pump out maximum profits and to exploit the continent. In trade terms, Moscow lags far behind competitors. Russia says its trade with African countries rose to 20 billion last year, but Russia did not rank among the continent's top 5 largest trade and goods partners, according to Eurostat. Russian exports to Africa have risen significantly in recent years. Food, usually the biggest single export category, and of course arms. 15% of Russian arms exports go to the continent. Buhari is seen here arriving at Sochi International Airport. The President of the Republic of Guinea, HE, Mr. Alpha Conde, is seen in this photograph. I've written severally about Putin. I call him a geopolitical grandmaster. That was in October 2015. 5th December 2016, I spoke about a parabolic Putin rebound when I was referencing the interference in the US election. Mozambique's President Filipe Nyusi is heading for a landslide victory in elections, according to a preliminary estimate, in a contest the opposition claims has been tarnished by mega fraud. ISA program officer Domingos Rosario said that during its count, the institute found that in many polling stations across 7 different provinces, the number of votes greatly exceeded the number of voters registered at that station. Par for the course, I'm afraid, and they're going to win it even if they lost it. Mozambique's main opposition party described the country's October 15 elections as a mega fraud. Russia welcomed Newsy's victory and said no serious violations were detected. It's very difficult to go back to war. They're not well equipped anymore, which is a fair point. These are posters of the opposition, Osufo Bomade, in central Maputo, Mozambique. The Kwanza, that's the Angolan currency, has weakened 18% this month deliberately to 453 per dollar, the worst performance among more than 140 currencies monitored by Bloomberg, and extending its fall this year to 32%. South African oil shares up 6.07% year-to-date, dollar rand 14.627, Egyptian pound 16.1749. EGX 30 up 8.94% year-to-date. Nigeria's external reserves dropped from $45 billion in July to $40.3 billion in November 2019. Nigerian oil shares down 16.11% year-to-date. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 13.61% year-to-date. KRA tax collections fall by 32% in the first quarter. Tax income for government dropped by 32.4% between July and September, from 632.9 billion over a similar period in 2018. Oh boy, that really is undeniable and irrefutable and speaks to the underlying weakness in the economy. Kenya's changing population captured in 100 photos, BBC World. Africa's population is growing and quickly. Kenya is a big part of this equation. The country has nearly 50 million people. Its population is predicted to double by 2050. Nairobi-based photographer Toby Jones set out to create a vibrant, nuanced representation of Kenya. His 100-image photographic infographic called Demographica aims to put faces and stories to population statistics. Like many African countries in Africa, is incredibly young. Median age is only 20. And nearly 3/4 of the population, 37.5 million people, are under 30. In his portraits, 59 feature people 24 years or older, representing 29.5 million people. 34 feature people between 25 and 54, 17 million. Only 4 feature people 55 to 64, 2 million people. And just 3 portraits are of subjects 65 or older, 1.5 million. I don't want to use the words ticking time bomb, but it certainly is a challenge. You can say that again. Thank you for stopping by. I am grateful.